Thanks for coming in again to History in the Kitchen. I am Cheryl Ann Amendola, and I'm really excited that you joined me today. So welcome, thank you for coming. Today we're going to be talking about Obergefell V Hodges, the Supreme Court case that was decided in 2015 that made same-sex marriage legal in all 50 states. In case you were wondering, I'm going to be doing this every Friday at 1 p.m. Next week is our Independence Day one. We'll be making macaroni and cheese and discussing the Declaration of Independence. Very exciting for 4th of July. All right, so let's jump into it and talk about Obergefell v Hodges. Okay, first of all, the Supreme Court. A case doesn't just go straight to the Supreme Court. A case that goes to a court originally is called original jurisdiction, and the Supreme Court only has original jurisdiction in a couple of cases that are outlined by the Constitution. The way a lot of cases get to the Supreme Court is they are appellate cases or cases of appeal, and they have been decided in lower courts, sometimes one lower court, sometimes several lower courts, and the Supreme Court will take up the case in most cases because it had split decisions in lower courts. And Obergefell v Hodges is one of those cases. Same-sex marriage cases are cases that have been split in lower courts in different states, where some courts have said it is absolutely 100% a right of people to get married, even if they're of the same sex, especially when you're two people who love one another. And there are some courts that said absolutely not. It's up to the states to decide. The federal government is not allowed to tell a state what to do when it comes to marriage. So Obergefell v Hodges went through a couple of lower courts in order to get to the Supreme Court, who took up the case. So here's a little bit of history behind the case itself. James Obergefell married his partner, John Arthur, in Maryland in 2013. Then the two moved to Ohio, where their marriage wasn't recognized. Shortly after moving to Ohio, John was terminally ill, and he died. And James was not allowed to be listed as the surviving spouse on John's death certificate. And that's what prompted James Obergefell to bring the case to court, and eventually it would reach the Supreme Court. Something that we have to ask ourselves in this case is, why is the word marriage important? Why is calling it marriage important? Because in many states in 2015, when this case was decided, even though same-sex marriage was illegal, people were given something called a civil partnership. And that's not the same thing as marriage in name. So while people were given many of the same legal benefits as marriage, they weren't given the same term. And that's important. Marriage is important because of those legal benefits. Spouses can share health insurance. You can be called in an emergency as next of kin. Marriage itself is a symbol of commitment. When two people love each other, they get married in many cases. And if you are an opposite sex couple, you've always had that option. Further, a spouse who's listed as married can make a medical decision for you in an emergency. Or if, God forbid, something were to happen to you and you were dying, they would have visitation rights for you in the hospital. Or if you were ill in the hospital for a long time, they would be able to come and visit. Whereas if you are not a spouse, you're not let in. And could you imagine if the person you loved was taking their dying breath and you weren't allowed to say goodbye or be with them for the last moments on earth? That's a hard thing, I'm sure. Lastly, and I think the biggest thing, is marriage means equality. Same-sex couples are allowed to get married because it makes them equal. In the United States, there's not supposed to be any second-class citizenship, and not calling it marriage makes it second-class citizenship. So in 2015, the Supreme Court made a decision on this case. At that time, same-sex marriage was banned in 14 different states. And the lawsuit by Obergefell and lots of others, there were others that were involved as well, claimed that bans on same-sex marriage violated the Equal Protection Clause and Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. So the 14th Amendment has several different sections. It was passed in 1866 after the Civil War to protect Black Americans who had just recently been freed from enslavement. Or emancipated from enslavement is a better way to put it. But the 14th Amendment is expandable. It can apply to different people and different rights over time. And the interpretations have changed over time to include lots of different people. So Section 1 of the 14th Amendment says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. So people who are born here are citizens, period. And of the state in which they reside. So they're also citizens of that state. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Basically, what that means is that no state can make a law that's unfair to someone else, that breaks their rights in the Constitution, that takes away their rights in the Constitution. And it also says, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So what Obergefell and others were claiming is that by not allowing same-sex couples to get married, they were being denied their rights without due process of law. Basically for no good reason. So the Supreme Court had two questions to answer in this case. The first one was, does the 14th Amendment require a state to license a marriage between two people of the same sex? So does the 14th Amendment say that it's not fair, that it's not okay for a state to bar same-sex couples from getting married? The second question that it asks is, does the 14th Amendment require a state to recognize a marriage between two people of the same sex that was legally licensed and performed in another state? So basically what that question is asking is, because James and John were married in Maryland, does that require Ohio to recognize that marriage? And for both questions, the Supreme Court answered yes in a 5-4 decision. So the court was split. It wasn't an overwhelming majority that made the decision to legalize same-sex marriage across the United States. The dissenters, or the people who disagreed, the justices who disagreed, said that it was up to the states. It was a states' rights decision. However, the 5 justices that said, why, yes, same-sex couples should get married, it should be legal in all 50 states, it does take away their rights according to the 14th Amendment, said the following. Basically, they said that marriage is a fundamental liberty. It's a liberty protected by the 14th Amendment. And the case that they used as precedent, or older case that they used, was Loving v. Virginia, the case that allowed for interracial marriage to be legal all across the United States. So the Supreme Court had decided cases about marriage before. The justices said that marriage is inherent to individual autonomy. It's something that people decide for themselves. And it protects the most intimate relationship between two people. The institution of marriage protects two people. It gives them this intimate relationship. It's something of intimacy that they don't have otherwise. Some people choose not to get married, and that's okay. But for people who want to, the justices are saying it's their decision and they should be able to. They also said that marriage provides safeguards for children and families by legally recognizing them. So if a same-sex couple has a child, both of their names can go on the birth certificate, which protects a child in case one parent passes away, the other parent can have them. If the parents get divorced, they can go to family court and have protections for themselves. If the parents get divorced, assets can be divided evenly. Marriage has been historically recognized as a keystone to social order. People get married is basically what the justices are saying. For all of time, people have been getting married. So same-sex couples should be afforded that same right. They also said, which is interesting and true, there is no difference in principles between same-sex and opposite-sex marriages. Both kinds of couples are getting married for the same reasons, because they love each other and because they also need those legal benefits if they're in a relationship together and they're living together and they're choosing to bond their lives. So today, in celebration of Obergefell V Hodges, which was decided 5 years ago today, we are going to make some rainbow cookies. And our rainbow cookies are in honor of the pride flag. We're going to get started cooking first, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about the pride flag. We'll make sure that you have all of your ingredients. At this point, you're going to want to turn your oven on, preset it to 350. And you'll also want to line your baking sheet with some parchment paper. Even if it's nonstick, make sure you line it, because nonstick does not always mean nonstick. And you'll want to have all your ingredients out as well. I'll be using my electric mixer. You don't need to use an electric mixer. This can certainly be done by hand. I just use it because I really like my electric mixer. The attachment you're going to want is your paddle. Make sure you're using a paddle. Don't use the wire whisk, because your dough is just going to get stuck in the wire whisk. You'll also want to have 6 bowls because you're going to change the dough color into hopefully 6 different colors. I mixed purple. I'm not sure if it's going to turn out purple. We will see. And you also need all of your ingredients. So let's go through this ingredients list. My butter is in the refrigerator because we needed to cut 2 sticks into tablespoon pieces, and the butter needed to be cold. And the reason the butter needs to be cold is because we're not refrigerating the dough. That's part of the reason why I chose this recipe, because we were gonna have to refrigerate the dough and wait 20 minutes for that to happen. So I'll get the butter out of the refrigerator when I'm ready for it. You need 2 cups of granulated sugar. Yes, I realize that this is a wet ingredients pourry thing, but I measured it ahead of time to make sure that it was even. So you need 2 cups of white granulated sugar. You are going to need 2 tablespoons of whole milk. I've got my whole milk and my tablespoon. You are also going to need a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Here it is right here. You will also need 3 large eggs. The size of the eggs does matter. If they're too big, they're going to make your dough a little too wet. And if they're too small, they're going to make your dough too dry. So pick, if you have a box of large eggs, pick the smaller of the large eggs. Don't use jumbo, too big. And you need some baking powder. 3 teaspoons, a teaspoon of kosher salt, and 4 cups of flour, which I also measured dry in my other cup, but then put in my wet measuring cup because it can hold all 4 and you don't have to watch me pour it. All right, I'm gonna go grab the butter. And here's my butter, all cut up. Okay. So in our bowl, we're going to beat the cold butter and sugar until they're creamy. So where's my butter? I will also grab one of these to get it in there. Now I have an attachment that I usually put on here that makes the stuff go into the bowl very nicely. So I'm going to put that on so that I don't spill anything while you're watching, because that's embarrassing. I'll probably spill something, and that's okay. All right. So in goes the butter in pieces and the sugar. Now you're going to hear a little bit of noise from we're going to put that in there until it's creamy. It's not going to take too long. It's actually already getting pretty creamy as it is, and that's really exciting, especially because we're using cold butter and I wasn't too sure about that. I fiddle with a bunch of different recipes before I bring this to you. So next week when we make mac and cheese, it's going to be a bunch of different interpretations of Thomas Jefferson's favorite dish. But for this week, we have rainbow cookies. All right. So once that's all nice and creamy, which it should be getting there, your next ingredient is your 2 tablespoons of whole milk. All right. That looks really, really good. Okay, so we'll put 2 tablespoons of whole milk in there. Now, creamy doesn't necessarily mean you can't see the granulation of the sugar anymore, but what it does mean is that it's nice and mixed together. So we'll put our whole milk in here. Whole milk is important. The creamier the milk, the better. If you have half and half, or heavy cream, half and half or heavy cream would also work really, really well in this recipe. All right, so our milk is in there. It looks good so far. Next up is the vanilla. I don't think I've actually opened this yet. So while I'm pouring in the vanilla, in case you were wondering, the pride flag was made in 1978 by a man named Gilbert Baker. And the reason it's a rainbow is because he was inspired by Judy Garland's Over the Rainbow. And each one of the colors actually means something. The first version of Gilbert Baker's flag had 8 colors, but when the flag started being mass produced for parades, particularly in San Francisco at first, the hot pink fabric ran out, so they couldn't find hot pink fabric, and then in order to evenly divide marchers on one side of the street and the other, they wanted 3 colors and 3 colors. They didn't want 4 colors and 3 colors, so the turquoise got dropped as well. So the popular flag that you see today with 6 colors, like this one, actually started out as an 8-color flag. All right, that's looking pretty good. I like it. I like what I'm seeing in there. All right, next up is I'm going to add the eggs. So 3 eggs. There's 1. Another thing that I recommend when you're using, especially eggs, because you're gonna have the shells, hopefully not inside the bowl, is a trash bowl. So it's just a bowl where you put your trash. I have mine over there. My trash bowl. All right, there's my 3 eggs going in there. All right, that looks fantastic. It should be kind of a yellowish color at this point because you put the eggs in. And after the eggs, now that once your mixture is well combined, you're going to add the flour, the baking powder, and the salt. Flour first, all 4 cups. This to me is the most challenging part of baking because flour gets everywhere. You'll notice I'm wearing a black shirt. It's probably going to be a white shirt by the time I'm done. So we'll do this a little bit at a time. I'm going to take this off now because I find it to be easier if I do it without that. And don't dump it all in at the same time. If you do that, you're going to get a glob. And you don't want a glob, you want a cookie. Make some beautiful rainbow cookies for the 5th anniversary of Obergefell V Hodges. All right, I'm gonna let that mix a little bit. Now, if you wanted to use the hook attachment on your mixer, you could. Or if you're mixing by hand, one of the things I like to do is actually stick my hands in it. But please, as always, make sure you've washed your hands prior to baking. I did not sing the preamble to the Constitution to you this week. I'm sorry, I did my hand washing before I started. All right, I'm gonna turn that down to stir. It's on a little bit high. All right, next up is my baking powder. I need 3 teaspoons of baking powder. Here's my teaspoon. Get that off. And always make sure that it's even. This way you don't have too much or too little. 1. 2. And 3. That's all in. Now I'm going to stop for just a moment just to knock the dough off of my paddle and make sure that all of it gets evenly stirred. So if you want to stop for a minute, if you're not doing this by hand, and knock the dough off the paddle, you can do that. In fact, I recommend it. You should also push it off the sides of the bowl because our next step is coloring it. All right, last ingredient is going to be our salt. And I need 1 teaspoon of salt. So we'll put the salt in there. There we go. And we'll let it stir for a minute. Okay. So while this is stirring, why don't I talk to you a little bit about the colors of the pride flag and what each of them means? Because when Gilbert Baker designed the flag, he designed it so that each color had a meaning to the gay community. So, and there are many, many different flags that are flown for people all across the LGBTQA spectrum. This is the one that I chose for today, mostly because this is the one that most people see. So red means life, orange is healing, yellow is sunlight, green is nature, blue or indigo is serenity, and violet is spirit. So each one of these has a meaning. All right, let's knock that stuff off the side again. And this is looking fantastic. Okay, so I think we're ready to color the dough. And we're also gonna find out if my purple worked, which will be nice. Whoops. Okay, so let's get that dough out of there. We're gonna wanna break this into 6 different bowls, or into 6 different parts for 6 different bowls. If you don't have 6 colors, just break it into the number of colors that you do have. If your dough is too wet, my dough is just right. It's a little bit sticky, but not too bad. If your dough is too wet, add 1/4 cup of flour, stir, and then if it's still too wet, add 1/4 cup of flour more. Happy Pride from an ally. Happy Pride. All right, so I also found out today that there's an ally flag. I had no idea. It's very cool. It has black and white stripes in the back, and then the letter A made out of rainbow. Super cool. Did not know that. All right, so if we take our dough, break it up into 6 different colors. I really can't wait to see if the purple works. It looks a little gray right now. If it doesn't work, we're just gonna have 5 color cookies. That'll be okay. And what I'm also really excited about is you don't have to roll the dough out at all. We are going to make dough logs instead, and they're gonna look the cookie's gonna look more like a pretzel than it is a round cookie itself. All right, so there's 2, 3. All right. You might need to flour your hands. I might need to flour my hands. I'm getting a little bit sticky. That's okay, I don't mind. I have 2 boys, I play in dirt and slime and things all the time. So this is nothing. They were very excited to mix the colors. Our food coloring did not come with orange. So they mixed orange, and we tried purple on our own. The purple, however, we'll see. Okay, so here we have our 6 balls of dough. They should be pretty even. So if they don't look even to you, try to even them out so that you have this approximately the same amount of dough for each color. All right. I'm gonna get the dough off my hands very quickly, and then we'll grab the colors. All right, so let's start out with red. Now, if you want a true red color cookie, you're going to have to put a lot of red food coloring in. You might get pink. I already know I'm going to get pink because that's what this particular brand of food coloring does when you use red. For Valentine's Day, I tried to make red Rice Krispie treats, and they were pink Rice Krispie treats no matter how much red food coloring I put in. So I'm just going to put in as much as I can. If you are using, this is gel. If you're using liquid food coloring, just a couple of drops should work. If you put in more than that, what I'm afraid of is that your dough is going to get super wet. So also be prepared to use your hands. I'm using a spoon for your benefit right now. I'm probably going to switch to my hands. Mostly because that's how I prefer to work. Oh gosh, look, it's actually turning out red and not pink. That's very exciting. Okay, while you're mixing your colors, make sure that it's going totally evenly through. You don't want to have any white cookie dough left because then that won't be any fun for the cookies. You want a true rainbow cookie for your pride flag cookie. All right. And of course, if you have any questions for me about the Supreme Court, about the case itself, about the 14th Amendment, you can always ask and I'll do my best to answer them. But also, if you have any questions about the recipe, we can go over that too. I am so excited. Look at this. It actually is red. All right, awesome. Okay, let's try the orange. This is the orange food coloring I made. Actually, my son TJ made it. He was very excited to know that red and yellow, or that red and yellow go together to make orange. So I'm just gonna use this spoon, this teaspoon for mixing this because the orange dye is kind of on it already anyway. Now, hopefully I have enough orange dye. All right, we're switching to fingers. We're switching to fingers. Okay, hopefully I have enough orange dye to make this a true orange dough. It looks like it's going to be more yellow than anything else. But no, it's turning. That's good. All right. We're going to put a little bit more in here, I think. So put a little bit of red, not too much, or at least whatever I have left, and a little bit of yellow. And we're going to just put lots of yellow in this one because that's going to be the yellow bowl. All right, let's try mixing this a little bit more. See if we can get a good orange. And I was worried about the red. All right, can we get a good orange in here? There it goes. Now, what I might do is wash my hands and then flour them so that I don't get quite so sticky. All right. There. So we needed just a little bit more dye to get it to turn orange. It's a very light orange, more like a creamsicle than a neon. I suppose I can live with that. So let's get the orange dye off of my fingers. And take a look. There we go. We have orange. Looks a little like baby food, actually. Okay, just go rinse my fingers again. Now, if you weren't watching, I'd be doing this much more quickly and way more messily. So this is for your benefit, that I'm actually being neat about it. All right, let's get the yellow. Yellow is pretty easy because I have plenty of yellow food coloring, and it's also a nice light color. Very excited about the orange and the red. It's working out swimmingly. Okay. Yellow. Nice pretty yellow. A little bit of white left in there, so I'm just going to stir one more time. All right, let's get the green done. I'm Italian, so I have an infinite amount of wooden spoons. All right. Green. Lots of green on my finger. Now, also, as we're mixing, I just want you to ask yourself a question. Has your humanity ever needed to be decided by a court? Or has your relationship ever needed to be validated by a court? It's an interesting thing for you to think about, especially if the answer to either of those questions is no, because there's a certain amount of privilege that you have that other people do not, that same-sex marriages were not afforded, that same-sex couples were not afforded. So I would like for you to just keep that in mind as we think about today's Supreme Court case. All right, last one. I have another wooden spoon. Then we're going to try the purple. The purple might be gray, no promises. All right. You know, since I'm doing this every week, I might have to invest in more plastic baking bowls. All right. This way I'm not using the soup bowls to do this. All right, ta-da, we've got some blue. Nice pretty blue. I like it. And ready? Let's see. I think the purple might just be dark blue. The purple is just dark blue. So I think we're going to skip it because it's not really purple. We're just going to skip that one. So we'll put this dough to the side. The next thing you're going to want to do is get a piece of parchment paper, put it on your counter. You're also probably going to want to get your wooden spoons out of all of the dough and put a little bit of flour on there. At this point, you're going to want to flour your hands because you're going to start touching the dough. So put a little bit of flour on our parchment paper. Okay, all-purpose flour is just fine for this. Okay, you're going to take a piece of red and roll it into a log. Just make sure you can see that. You're going to grab some orange. Roll it into a similarly sized log. My logs are not similarly sized, so I'm just going to make this one. I'm going to make the red one again. Now, careful about the amount of flour that you're getting on this, because then it's going to lighten the colors. All right, so red, orange, grab a piece of yellow, make a similarly sized log. I hope you guys are getting the hang of this. there's a pattern here. Okay, we're putting it together. It's starting to look like a beautiful rainbow. Okay, then you're going to get the green. And, wait for it, make a similarly sized log. Okay. And the purple didn't quite work out, so this is going to be my last color. If you have purple, please send me a picture. And we're going to put it together like this. Okay, so now we're going to press them together and you have this rainbow. Then what you're going to do is you're going to lift it up and you're going to do something like, you're going to fold it over itself. It's a very big cookie. It's going to look like this. Okay, here's the bottom. And put it on your baking sheet. And you're going to continue to do this until you run out of dough. So I'll do one more with you and then I'll throw them in the oven. And there you have our rainbow pride cookies. So yellow, green, and if you want a smaller cookie, just make your logs smaller, and blue. Stuck together. I think you can see that. That's a good spot. That's a good angle. And fold it over. Oops, mine broke. So that it looks like a cookie. Now these are going to go into the oven for about 15 minutes or so, maybe a little less. You have to keep an eye on them. They are really big cookies. So you'll just leave them in until they set and the bottom is a little bit of a golden brown. So I'm gonna go put mine in and here's what they look like. Here's my first two. And I'll post a picture of them when they're finished because I don't wanna keep you for much longer. And remember, they're going in at 350. So I hope you learned something today. I hope you learned a little bit about the 14th Amendment. Sure, last step. So I'll make one more. Grab some red. I'm actually gonna make it a little smaller this time. Make our logs. Red, orange, yellow, green. They are kind of like knots, Kristen. They are. If you've ever made an Italian knot cookie, they're a lot like a knot cookie. That's basically how I'm folding them over. However, if my mom were making them, she would tell me that they weren't folded precisely. That's for you, Mom, because I know you're watching. All right, so I'm just going to take it and fold it over so it kind of looks like a ribbon. And then tuck it in so it looks like this. And I'm just gonna go throw this one right in the oven. I hope this helped a little bit. You're very welcome. And they look really pretty in the oven. All right, so I hope that you learned something today. I hope you had a really good time. My blog, if you want to follow it, I always post the recipe to my blog afterwards, is teachinghistoryherway.com. You can also rewatch the video either here on Facebook or on YouTube at Teaching History Her Way. I hope that you learned a lot about the 14th Amendment today. I hope you learned about its original purpose and how it has been reinterpreted. And don't talk about my mama. My mom was watching. She just said, hey. And I hope you also recognize, if you have certain privileges, what those privileges are that other people do not, and that some people need to fight for what you have and for the privileges that you are afforded just by being alive. So love is love is love. Happy Pride. And I hope I will see you next week for our Declaration of Independence. Our Declaration of Independence episode. We'll be talking about the Declaration of Independence, but not just that. We'll also be talking about the Seneca Falls Convention, as well as What's the Slave is the 4th of July, and talking about what the 4th of July means to lots of different people. And we'll be making Thomas Jefferson's macaroni and cheese next week, so we won't be baking. Next week's not a dessert. It's a yummy, yummy mac and cheese. All right, I will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a great day. Happy Pride, everybody.